Psalm 97 sounds like this, verse 6, "The heavens proclaim his righteousness, every nation sees his glory." Psalm 97 is a psalm that talks about the magnificence of God and how the skies and the earth and creation proclaim the glory of God. So I was beginning to do a little bit of research on some of the amazing things about the universe, and I was quickly getting swallowed up in that. So I found this one star that's named Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse. Maybe you know, not the movie character, but this is the actual name of a star, Betelgeuse. And Betelgeuse is so big, it is larger than our sun. In fact, if you took the diameter of Betelgeuse and put it where our sun is, it would take out Mercury, and it would go to Venus, and it would go to Earth, and it would go beyond Earth to Mars, and even all the way out, and it would encapsulate Jupiter. This is one star, and we're talking millions and millions of miles apart. That's just one star out there. So here's what I want you to do. I was going to find a bunch of these facts and just start blowing your minds, and because the heavens, the Bible say, declare the amazing attributes of God. So I'm going to have you in your little clusters here. Now, hopefully someone in your cluster might have a smartphone to help you out in this. Otherwise, you might be pulling from the depths of your knowledge of the universe. But I want you to work together a little bit. So this little cluster over here, you guys need to find something really cool about the universe that proclaims the glory of God. So I just used Betelgeuse is my example. Find something cool, okay? You guys look like a smartphone crew. You guys find something that looks like you might have one saving hope here, okay? Something cool about the universe that proclaims the glory of God, okay? You guys come up with, you got to work together, just have one. Yeah, it can be all creation, but primarily anything in the universe that's just mind-blowing, that proclaims the glory of God. That's what all our tables are doing. Youth, kids, you're in this too. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. So, what did this group come up with?
Well, we're looking at large numbers because I like numbers.
Large numbers, okay.
Okay, and the universe has over 100 billion stars, and God calls each one by name.
The universe has over 100 billion stars, and God calls each one by name. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. 100,000 million. That's a lot of O's. A lot of O's. Our tech team came up with something, right, guys? What did you come up with?
Job 26:7.
What is Job 26:7?
He hangeth the earth on nothing.
He hangs the earth on nothing. And we won't ask you to explain how that one works, but it is pretty amazing. All right. The high technology crew over here. What did we come up with?
The high technology she stole, so we went with number 2.
Oh, she stole yours. Okay.
I stole hers. Okay, the sun is over 100 times the diameter of the earth. If it were hollow, it could hold over 1 million earths. At first, it seems almost wasteful to create such a massive globe merely to provide light for earth, until we consider that God created the sun just as easily as he did the rest of the universe.
Very cool. The sun holds 1 million Earth-sized planets. That's pretty big. Wow. Puts things in perspective. Okay, where are we? Who's our spokesman? The man with the crooked finger. What do you have for us?
One light year is about 6 trillion miles. The universe is 93 billion light years. So multiply them two numbers.
And
You'll almost have the national debt.
Dan checked those measurements himself, so. And we had another one? With a ruler. There's a planet that's made of all ice and it's on fire. Wow. We'll have to look that one up. That's pretty wild. Hey, I gotta cut this group off. All right, we got tables to cover here. Denise looks like she has a fact just ready to go. What do you got, Denise?
Well, I'm going to start with the verse.
I'll finish.
Through him, Jesus, God created everything in the heavens and on the earth. He made things we can't see. Goes down and says, through him, all things hold together.
Through Jesus, our Creator, all things are held together. And what verse is that?
It's in Colossians.
It's in Colossians. Just read the book, you'll find it.
Okay, wait.
Okay, she's not done.
In the human body, in the DNA, there is a genome called laminin.
She's talking genomes. She's going over my head now.
It is the cohesive cell that holds all other cells together.
Okay.
It's in the shape of a cross.
In the shape, genome, in the shape of a cross that holds all things together. And Colossians says that Jesus holds all things together. Pretty cool. Awesome. Good work, crew. I'll come back up there with you, Stephen. We'll finish the youth. The youth has more facts to share. All right, this one has like all the teachers at the table, so.
She actually took ours.
She took ours. That's a very teacher-like response. You've heard your.
We got a bonus one.
Okay, what's the bonus fact?
So the second law of thermodynamics says that everything should be going to randomness and chaos and disorder. If you put something on the table, it'll eventually rot and fall apart. Okay? That's exactly contrary to all the evolutionists who are saying that we're taking all this random stuff and eventually creating humans. So there has to be some force that's putting it together, and that force is God.
We're talking the second law of thermodynamics. If genomes weren't over my head, there is something bringing order to the chaos. Very, very cool. All right, this looks like a smart table.
Right here, take a look at the cross.
She,
The cross holds everything together.
we have a picture of the genome over here, Denise. So are you guys partnering? Okay. All right,
You're
no.
the one that fended us against each other. Don't be.
Hey, there's a lot of facts about the universe. I don't know how you're all coming up with the same stuff. All right, let's listen to this table.
95% of the universe is invisible.
95% of the universe is invisible.
That's what it says.
That's what the internet says it. It must be true. That's pretty cool.
But Jack said, how do we know it's invisible? Because we can't see it.
That's, we have a conundrum at this table. All right.
And then we have words like conundrum.
Gordon says that 95% of the universe is invisible. Jack says, how do you know if you can't see it? So there's a mystery. That table's shrouded in mystery. All right, we have this table.
Everybody took all over.
Are we plumb out of answers? That's okay because the youth has an extra one. You want to use theirs?
We'll let them do it.
All right, Stephen, you had one last thing to share. What was it? Wait a second. Got to unlock the phone.
He made DNA, and if you stretch the DNA one cell out, it would be about 2 meters long. All of the DNA in your cells put together would go the whole way around the solar system twice.
Wow. Talk about being stretched thin. Whew. Very well, thank you for helping me with my illustration. Psalm 97, the heavens proclaim his righteousness, every nation sees his glory. You know, when I was doing a little bit of research on this, the scientists estimate there's, 100 billion or more stars in our solar system, and they believe there are more solar systems, or about the equivalent of the solar systems in the universe as grains of sand on our planet, and that's a tough thing to even comprehend. That is a big, big creation, and that speaks to a big, big Creator. So at this time, I want to hand it over to our worship team. We're talking about the magnitude of God. Let's speak a little bit about the magnificence of Christ.
So John was exiled to the island of Patmos. He's worshiping the Lord, and he heard a voice behind him, and it sounded like a loud trumpet blast. So a voice like no other. This is the magnificence of Christ. So listen to what John says as he recounts in Revelation, as he was taken up into heaven and told to write down in a book everything that he saw. This is in Revelation 1:12 through 17. When I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 gold lampstands, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man. He was wearing a long robe with a gold sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like flames of fire. His feet were like polished bronze refined in a furnace, and his voice thundered like mighty ocean waves. He held 7 stars in his right hand, and a sharp 2-edged sword came from his mouth. And his face was like the sun in all its brilliance. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as if I were dead. But he laid his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last." John was so captivated by a glimpse of the risen and exalted Jesus, to see him in his glory, his eyes ablaze like fire and his face shining like the sun. He was so overwhelmed he fell face down to worship the great I Am, the Almighty One. The angels and the elders around his throne fell face down before him. In the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel sees a vision of the glory of the Lord in heaven, and he falls face down. Daniel sees a vision of the Lord Almighty, and he's just undone. He falls face down, speechless, lifeless. This is what happens when we are faced with Jesus, the risen King, the Almighty. So if you want to stand for a moment, we're going to sing the song Almighty. And for our little beautiful church here tonight, as we worship the Almighty, he inhabits the praises of his people. So imagine he's here with us. We're standing on holy ground, and we're singing to the Almighty. Let our hearts take a posture of face down, overwhelmed, undone, captivated worship of the Almighty One. So in my quiet time this week, God showed me something that I just wanted to share with you. The same God who created this vast universe created us, you and me, to walk with him and to be in relationship with him, to know him. So he doesn't need us to do anything for him. He merely wants to know us, and he wants us to know him. So here's what he taught me. Many times, I've said it many times, we say, I want to be used by God. Or we pray, God, just use me in a mighty and powerful way to advance your kingdom. I just want to be used by you, God. So I was challenged, and I want to challenge you just to change your thoughts, change your desires and your prayers there, and just actually say, I just want to know you, God, and I want to be known by you. So God used Pharaoh, but he knew Moses. God used King Saul, but he knew King David. God used Judas, but he knew Jesus. So God doesn't want to use you. He wants to know you. God can use any nation, any ruler, anyone, anytime to accomplish his purposes, and he does. God's plan from the beginning was just to know us, to be in a relationship with us. He didn't create you so he could use you. He created you so he could know you. So just for a moment, humor me, ladies. You're single for a moment, and you're in a public setting, and you see a handsome man across the room. He catches your eye. He comes over and he chats with you for a little while, and before you know it, he's asking you to go and have dinner with him. So you accept, and you go out to dinner with this man. You meet him in a public setting, and it's a lovely evening. You chat for a couple of hours, and at the end of the night, he looks across the table at you and says, "Will you marry me?" Of course, your response is going to be, "No, I don't know you." So this man's very committed. He wants you to know him. And so he asks you, "Would you have dinner with me again?" And you accept. He's nice and he's handsome. So you have dinner with him again. And this time he tells you all kinds of things about him. He tells you about his childhood and his scraped knees and his parents and his pets and his favorite foods. And at the end of the night, he says, "Now will you marry me?" And of course, your response is still no, if you're sane. You don't know him still. What we're looking for here is a deep, intimate relationship. You can know people, and you can know about God. You can know all kinds of things about God and about the Bible. You can quote scriptures. But what he's looking for is the posture of our hearts, to be submitted fully to him and to be in an intimate relationship with him. That comes with spending time with him and just reading his word, talking to him, walking with him. So next we're going to transition to Tricia reading us Psalm 139.
Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in, behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. If only you would slay the wicked, O God. Away from me, you bloodthirsty men. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and abhor those who rise up against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting.
So tonight, I have a lofty task of engaging you where one of my struggles is, and that is God's perception of me. And I want to help you wrestle with this just a little bit, because how we relate to God deeply depends on our understanding of His thoughts toward us. As we've talked about the magnificence of Christ and the majesty of God, I want to read just a couple verses from Psalm 8. You can hold your place if you're not there already in Psalm 139. But listen to David. He says this, "When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them." See, I think deeper than us knowing God is this profoundness of the thought that the God who has created earth and the sun, our galaxy, our solar system, and the universe actually thinks of us by name. That's a profound thought that maybe sometimes we take for granted. To be known by God is an amazing thing, but it is at the very core of what we've been created for. So I want to just take a moment from Psalm 139 and talk about what does it mean to be known by God, and how does this perception of Him help us to relate to Him? Because here's some struggles that I've had. I want my life to count. And when I stand before God and give an account of my life, I want to do that with joy. There's a bit of the fear of the Lord in me for that day, because I'm going to give an account of everything that I've done in my life, both good and bad. And God knows my motives. He knows everything about me. And though He will also be a rewarder. So I struggle as I go through this life as to how God is viewing my actions, my words, my thoughts, my struggles, my sins, all of this. How is He reacting to that? How is He perceiving that? How is that affecting our relationship? So I think I could paint it perhaps in this picture to help us understand, because sometimes we have a very wrong image of God and it pushes us away from Him. We want to keep a healthy distance from Him. We may think that we've done enough bad that He's on the edge of His throne waiting for us to get within reach so He can whack us, so He can judge us. And so how do we bring balance to all of this? So it really all depends on your position before God, whether He knows you or He does not. And the Bible says there's many people that He does not know. There's a way for us to become known by God. That doesn't happen automatically. But God is looking for those people who want to be known by Him, who are seeking Him. So maybe one way I could paint it, I was watching my kids play in the backyard today, and the thought occurred to me, what if someone were to run into that yard with the intentions of harming them? There is a part of being a parent where all of me would be all over that situation. And it's not, as I engaged the threat, I would not do so with compassion, mercy, understanding, gentleness. I'm going to take the threat out as quickly as I possibly can, and I'm not concerned with mercy. I'm not concerned with gentleness. I'm concerned with the safety and the protection of my children. See, it's my relationship with the people in play that determines how I'm relating to them. Now let's say that one of my children does something that's outside of the boundaries that I've set up. It's wrong. They've done wrong. How do I engage them now? Well, now it's different. I know them. I'm for them. I want to help them grow towards health. So now, even though it's again a scenario of corrective measure, now it's a time where mercy and grace and gentleness and all those things do come into play. So God mixes all that together in His communication. And we watch Him deal very severely at times with people and nations, and we watch Him deal with tremendous mercy and grace in other situations, and we just kind of take it all in. And if you're built anything like me, I typically tend to think when I mess up, I'm going to be more on the receiving end of punishment from God. And I don't know why my mind gravitates that way, but there are times that I'm very slow to approach God when I know I've wandered outside of His will, because I'm not real confident in my own mind as to His perception of me, how He perceives me, how He pursues me, how He knows me, and how that impacts my relationship with Him. So I want to bring you into that journey because I think it's essential that we know how God walks alongside those He knows well. So King David writes Psalm 139, and God knows King David very well. He makes that very clear. In fact, Barb brought up the point, God used King Saul, but there wasn't a closeness there. And Saul didn't desire a closeness there. Saul wanted to use God, and if it advanced Saul's own agenda or kingdom, he was happy to be used by God. But there wasn't a deep desire to be known by God from King Saul. There wasn't this deep seeking of God by Saul. Saul had his own agenda, his own kingdom, his own problems, his own people, and if he needed a prophet to come bring the power of God to fix some of that or advance some of that, he would use that. But Saul was not known by God like King David was. So King David is coming from this sense of God knows me. I am known by God. So verse 1 says this, O Lord, you have examined my heart. That word means to dig deeply into. And you know everything about me. So God begins from the posture of seeking after us. He searches us and He knows us, and He wants to know us deeply. Now, God already knows everything. So God can tell us the number of hairs on our head. He can tell us the number of molecules that make up of our body. He knows how the circulatory system works and the digestive system and every single thing about us. He knows that, but there is this soul He's placed in us that relates to God in a relational way. And He wants to draw close to us and know us deeply in that sense. Not an intellectual sense or a factual sense, but a relational sense as one who loves us. So David is just thinking about this. Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. So each one of us that has a relationship with the Lord, our own posture is one that, God, I want to know you, and I want you to know me deeply. Because again, I can't say that every person in the world is someone who is known by God. These are people who are seeking and long to have that relationship with Him. But we begin from this standpoint. You have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. So as you're thinking about that truth, just right now where you sit, He knows everything in your heart right now, the good and the bad, the things that you're hiding, the things that you're protecting, the things that you're holding on to. He knows all of that, and He has looked very, very deeply. He knows everything about you. He has examined you. So knowing that, by your estimation, what do you think God thinks of you? See, this is where one of my struggles is. Because my verse 2 of Psalm 139 might read something like, "O Lord, have mercy on me, withhold your judgment. Hold back your hand because my faults are glaring to me." And I just think, man, God, you can see everything in there? That starts to make me a little uncomfortable. So we read that and we understand that God digs deeply into our hearts and knows everything about us. Now, this is where it begins to become important that we know how God relates to us. Let me read verses 2 and 3. You know when I sit down or stand up, and that means everything in between. These are David's daily activity. He knows our daily activities, what we're up to. You know my thoughts, even when I'm far away. And I would say he doesn't just know your thoughts, again, in an intellectual sense, because God knows all things, but he understands them. He understands why you think the way you think. He understands why you wrestle with some of the things that you wrestle with. He knows not just your actions, but what is in your heart. He knows your motives. He can see that clearly and deeply into us. Here's a thought. He knows your thoughts about other people. He knows it all. We are an open book for God to see. He is deeply familiar with all of our ways. So David is he's just sitting here thinking, pondering, meditating on this truth about God. He says in verse 3, you see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it. God hears everything that we say. His ears are very attentive to those that he knows. He knows every word's on our tongue because in Luke 6:45 we're told that out of the overflow of the mouth, the heart speaks. So because God is so intimately familiar with what's in our heart, he knows already before we even say it what's going to come out of our mouth. You know, I can only speculate how we would try to guide our thoughts and our words and our actions if we really, truly, deeply believed all of this. So again, there's this balance. Matthew 12:36 says that we will give an account for every idle word that comes out of our mouth. But God is speaking to mixed people here as he's giving an instruction. One day we'll all stand before God. And for some of us, that day of account will be awful because it's a day of judgment. For those whose names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, it will be a day of us answering for every sin that we have ever committed. But for those whose sins have been washed away by the blood of the Lamb and they've received Christ into their hearts and been made new, and God now lives within them, and the price of sin, the cost of sin, the penalty of sin has all been washed away, the record is expunged entirely. Well, that's a different day of judgment. That's what the Bible calls the Bema seat, the judgment seat of the Lord. And in that day, the judgment seat of Christ, it'll be a day of reward, where we're not answering for every single sin that has ever been committed before God that he may punish us, but he will look meticulously through our lives and find those things that we did in obedience to him, empowered by the Holy Spirit. Now, he does say on that day there will be many who suffer great loss. There will be much that he will not be able to reward us for. It might have looked really good down here, but he knows the motives. He'll test and refine all of that. But that day of judgment for his own will be much different than the day of judgment for the wicked world. It'll be a day that he is looking to reward us for everything that he possibly can. He looks to see the good in us, like any father would. So we are often commended in Scripture to live before the Lord each day so that we can give an account of our life with joy and not sorrow. And again, I think this reflects our attitude of the Lord as we think about that day that we're going to give an account of our lives. As we live each day, as we live it closely with him, we are beginning to build something on the day that we will stand before him. We're building a relationship. God is going to test. He's going to confess us before the Father if we confess him before men. When we live openly as a follower and a lover of Christ, we're going to be building on a foundation that God can richly reward, because Jesus will be able to look to the Father and say, God, I know this one. I know him. I know her by name. We've done much together. We've spent time together. David says, you know all these things. You know all I do. You know all that I say, even before I say it. In verse 5, he says, you go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. He gives this picture of having His hands on us, and at the same time going before us and following us. And it painted a very, immediately what came to my mind is my son Skylar's at this really fun age where we took the training wheels off the bike. So we're spending a little time each day to get out into the driveway. And of course, he's real wobbly right now. He's used to the training wheels. So I put a hand out in front of him on the steering wheel, and I put a hand behind him on his bike seat, and off we go. And as we go down the driveway, I've got a hand before him and I've got a hand following him, and I'm just trying to give him just enough touch so that he doesn't end up in a big broken pile in the driveway. And we get a little less and a little less each time, but there's a lot of corrective measures going on there, a lot of them. You know, he's leaning too far this way, he's turning too hard. All these different things are happening. But when you've got a hand behind and a hand before, there's a lot of protection that can take place. And that's the image that God is giving here as those He knows. He's going before them, He's going behind them, He's in this journey with them. And when the Lord says He knows us, it is a very close, very intimate walk with Him. So I love listening to David express what it means to be known by God. That means that He's always near. And some of that's really important too. I've talked with several of you in this room who are going through really, really difficult trials right now. Natasha, you come to mind. You know, some of the health things that you're dealing with, they're life-threatening. You're way too young of a mama to have your life threatened by health. And you are doing it so courageously because the Lord is walking with you. And you're making so much of Christ. I'm very proud of you, by the way, Natasha. I'm glad you're here tonight. But sometimes when you're going through that very lonely, very dark place, we need to understand what it means to be known by God, because sometimes it feels like maybe He's out of reach. Maybe it feels like our prayers aren't going beyond the ceiling. Maybe it feels like He's forgotten us and is unconcerned with what we are having to carry in our life. We need to be reminded of just how close He is. For those of us that the Lord knows, He knows our thoughts and understands them. He understands our struggle. He is very, very near, no matter what it might feel like. And really, this is almost beyond our ability to grasp. When you begin to think of the magnitude of God and the majesty of Christ and how unapproachable they are, and then you think that they are seeking, God seeks after us as though we are something important and significant to Him. No wonder King David says, "Who am I that you are mindful of me? I'm like an ant." And yet God knows us and loves us very, very much. David says in the next verse, "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me." He's overwhelmed. "It's too great for me to understand." So David thinks about this a lot. And even though he's a king, he approaches God with all humility because he understands how much greater God is than he. And Tricia read through Psalm 139. If we were to look at the next chunk of verses, starting in verse 7, which I'm not going to do tonight, but I would actually encourage you in your quiet time through the next week as you're spending time pursuing God, get back in Psalm 139, because in verse 7 it starts to talk about where God said He has examined our hearts and knows everything about us. This next section then goes into His pursuit of us. He doesn't reject us. He doesn't see our failures and our wickedness and our struggles and say, "This one ain't for me." He pursues us that we might have this relationship with Him. So I think what I want you to understand is by the time David gets to the very end, Even though God says that he knows everything about him and he has examined him, and some of us would hear those words and perceive that as a threat. God, there's things that I don't want you to look too deeply in. But God's not interested in knowing us at some superficial level. He wants to go as deep as he can possibly go. But it takes some level of cooperation. You are able to hold him at arm's length. A relationship between two individuals takes the cooperation of two people. You can have one willing person and one unwilling, and you're not going to have the kind of relationship that reflects what God is looking for. And here's what I know. God's not the guilty party in this one. God has a heart to know his people deeply. We are the ones that start to get distorted pictures of God, and we start to withdraw from his presence, and we just want to know him from a safe distance. This isn't the design. He wants us to come close to him. So look what King David, he's such a great example. King David says this, knowing that God can see everything in him, he invites him, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. So here's what King David got that I struggle with sometimes, and maybe you do too. To be known deeply by God is not a threat. It's not a threat. I think for any one of us to come to some other individual in this room and say, here's my heart, and every secret that I have would be a threat. I don't have the trust that just goes quite that deep with every person in my life. We're not able to do that. But God's not like the people in this room. And the people in this room are good people. In fact, we're working hard on loving one another and becoming a family in this room. But God and David here demonstrates a complete trust. And I think this is part of our journey, to trust God. God values us. Therefore, for him to know us is not a threat. So David actually, instead of keeping God at an arm's distance, a safe distance, David opens up wide and says, God, I want you to go into the deepest, darkest recesses of my heart because you know me better than I know me. Jeremiah the prophet said in chapter 17, verse 9, the heart is deceitful. Above all things, it is desperately wicked. Who can know it? We can't, but God can. So King David, understanding that, literally gives his heart to the Lord and says, I want you to examine all of it, and you show me what I don't know about my heart because you know me better than I do. If you give God the opportunity to do that, I'll promise you, he does begin to reveal things. I have a habit in my life of spending a portion of time with the Lord each day, and a lot of times I'll do that throughout a walk because it gets me away from distractions. If I stay in an office, I stay at my house, there's just always stuff to be done, and there's phones nearby, and it's just I don't have enough concentration to do it, so oftentimes I'll go for a walk, and I'll take some verses with me and pray over those. But it's a time where I try to give the Lord that opportunity. God, look inside me. What do you see? Let's wrestle with that a little bit. I promise you that's not a prayer that God will overlook. And sometimes he will bring things up to me in a perspective that I'm not used to looking at it. It's not always the most flattering view of me. But he does it because, like a father to a child, he's trying to point out wrong thinking or a flaw or things that down the road are going to get you into trouble or things that aren't aligning with his holiness. And he corrects. But we have to give him the opportunity to do that. When is the last time that you, like King David, prayed something like this? Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. This is how we minister to the Lord. This is a prayer that instead of asking God to fix things in our life, to make things better in our homes and on our relationships, we're saying, God, this prayer is all about you. How can I relate to you in a way that honors and pleases you? We need to cooperate in this process as God is willing to look deep inside us. And rather than resisting him when he gets to some of those areas that we're not proud of, we need to acquiesce and allow him to come in and reshape us and to guide us so that we can walk in the way of everlasting life, the way of holiness. So with this perspective in mind and these verses being freshly read, I'm going to ask our worship team to come up here. We're going to sing a couple more songs tonight, but this particular song actually comes right out of Psalm 139, verses 23 through 24. So even if you don't know it, we didn't choose this song because we thought it would be your favorite song, but it's just scripture set to words. And I want you to take the truth that God has revealed to you tonight, his thoughts towards you, and just in a time of prayer tonight, we're going to let the worship team lead this. If you know the song or want to sing along. But this is really meant to be a time of prayerful reflection between you and the Lord, where you're actually inviting him. God, search my heart. If there's anything out of alignment between you and I, right now, bring that to my attention and let's begin to work through that. I want to know you, but I want greater still to be known by you. Cooperate with him in that process. Thank you, team.
Please stand and join us. So as we sing this song right out of Psalm 139, use this song as a prayer to the Lord. So some of you, I'm sure, have walked with the Lord very closely, have a deep, intimate relationship with him, and much like David, we always need to be asking him to just search us and know us and reveal things that we don't even know that are hidden inside. And I'm sure there are some who are walking through a desert right now. It's very dry, and you know he's there, and yet you just feel just so abandoned, hurting. He is leading you through that desert to a place where you'll know him. So use this song to just search deeply, ask him to reveal himself to you in a personal way. And for those of you who don't know him and you haven't made that commitment yet, let tonight be the night that you just ask Jesus into your heart. You surrender, you believe. Use this song as a prayer to him. Ask him to cleanse you of your sins. Bring all of your life before him. Ask him to search you and know you. So join us as we sing. Hopefully some of you know the words.